Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for appearing again today. The Australian Public Service works under or in accord with a code of conduct. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. How does that work in practice? That's a very broad question, but...
I'm happy, but do you want to engage in?
Sure. Senator, as we've alluded to earlier, I guess in our evidence we have a APS code of conduct, and that sets out the standards and I guess the expectations of on all public servants. And in particular, in the Public Service Act, it is quite clear around articulating what the APS values are and how they apply to all public servants. I can go into more detail around the code of conduct requirements if you wish.
So it basically drives behaviour or indicates behaviours that are appropriate? Or values?
It sets what the appropriate behaviours are, what the appropriate expected, I guess, standards of conduct are, and it does outline the APS values, and it goes into some detail about those values.
So it's broad, it's not specific because it doesn't apply to just one department or one agency, it's very broad.
It applies to everyone, but sitting underneath that, I mean, it's quite a detailed document, and in particular, sitting under the Public Service Act, there's also Commissioner's directions which go into more detail as well around how everything actually applies.
Okay. Can you please elaborate on the Australian Public Service value of impartiality, specifically how the public service should be interpreting it practically when making submissions to inquiries?
Is there something specific about an inquiry?
Well, my concern is that it seems some agencies aren't being fully impartial when making submissions, especially in the area, for example, of climate policy, which is dangerous because it leads to groupthink. So my interpretation of that value of impartiality is that if an agency or a department is making a submission on, for example, a law change, that submission should be limited to the agency's ability to carry out that policy change. That might mean resource considerations, practical issues of whether they can actually enforce the policy. Is that what you would be expecting in a submission that meets those values of impartiality, rather than making a submission in favour or against a policy on the basis of the political aspects?
Senator, what I can say is that the guidance around impartiality is reminding public servants that in conducting their duties, that they are to be apolitical, that they are to not obviously be biased in the way in which they conduct their duties. I don't think I can really provide, I think you're asking me more for an opinion around a particular instance that you have in mind.
Well, it's several instances. It seems that we have some agencies and departments making submissions that endorse the policies being put forward from an ideological standpoint, not only commenting on the practicalities of implementing the policy for that agency or that department, as I just said. For example, the Australian Energy Regulator made a submission to the National Energy Laws Amendment. In that submission, they endorsed the net zero policy setting of the government and said they support it, which doesn't seem to be impartial. Shouldn't they only be commenting on their ability to implement the changes, not endorsing the policy driving the changes?
The requirement of impartiality, as Ms Talbot outlined, is that the APS is apolitical, but it also provides advice, and I'm just going to quote from section 10(5) of the Act, with advice that's frank, honest, timely and based on the best available evidence. So this is within the CER's view around its view of what's the best available evidence and what's coherent with that, and what's required to achieve that.
So they would be informed by scientific evidence, would they?
Well, that's what the CER will, I think, will say, Senator. You should ask
You're
them
smiling.
Around. We used to deal with this in estimates 10 years ago.
So, net zero policy is within climate policy, and that's subject to a lot of contention in the public. So supporting that would seem to me to be not upholding the impartiality, especially when there's been no logical scientific points, including empirical scientific evidence, to back up net zero anywhere in the world. So they failed a science test, so surely they're acting impartially. Partially.
I think that's a view. That's your view, Senator. I think it's up to that authority to explain how it views the evidence and provide that explanation to you of why they're acting impartially.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.